first speaker for this afternoon, okay, let me just check this. Our first speaker this afternoon is the Socioeconomic Planning Secretary of the Philippines as Director General of the National Economic and Development Authority. He is also the Professor Emeritus of Economics, having served as Professor and Chairman of the Department of Economics at the University of the Philippines. He was also a lead economist at the Asian Development Bank. His work experience covered investment, climate, and productivity, economic growth, poverty reduction, education and health, human resource development, and regional economic cooperation in Asia. Our first speaker also served as regional advisor on population and employment policy for Asia and the Pacific with the International Labor Organization, or the ILO. He served as chair of the Board of Trustees at the University of San Carlos from 2011 to 2014 and director of the Board of the Philippine American Academy of Science and Engineering from 2008 to 2013. He is also on the boards of a number of NGOs involved in education and health concerns, population and development, and the care of street children. Ladies and gentlemen, please give a round of applause to our first speaker, the Honorable Secretary Ernesto Pernia.
Well, good afternoon, everyone. And okay, I'll try to keep you awake with my slides. Okay, let me start by saying that, well, let me greet, of course, the Mr. Dante Ang, the owner of Manila Times, and Dante Ang II, and of course the editors and the editorial staff and the editorial board of the Manila Times. Let me go straight to my presentation. So, my fellow co-workers in government, our friends and partners from the private sector, there's several of you here. I think you're the dominant majority. The media, ladies and gentlemen, good afternoon. I'm pleased to share with you updates on the Philippines' recent economic performance and prospects for growth in the coming years. Okay, there are three things or three features of the economy that I'd like to note, and these are, first, our economy has been on a consistent upward growth trajectory, rather sharp in more recent years. And as you know, and this has been said several times in the media, our growth in 2017 was 6.7%, and of course it was within our growth range target of 6.5 to 7.5%. And so with that kind of growth rate, we are poised to be among the fastest rising economies in Asia, at least third or even second. Point number two is that our economy is undergoing structural transformation. Dante Ang II mentioned that our economy has been driven by consumption on the spending side and service sector on the supply side. But in fact, if you look at the graph, you can see that the growth rate of investment on the demand side is now growing faster than the growth of household consumption. And on the supply side, the growth of industry, especially manufacturing, is also getting faster compared with the growth of industry. So this is structural transformation. This is some qualitative change of the economy, which is crucial to sustaining growth and generating stable and quality jobs. I'll skip the next slide. Okay, let me just explain to you why there was a little dip in our economic growth between 2016 and 2017. Next slide, please. If we compare ourselves with other post-election years like 2005 and 2005 and 2011, you can see that the dive in 2005 was pretty steep, and as well as in 2011. I think there's some mistakes here on the years, but then the dive in economic growth rate in 2017 vis-a-vis 2016 was rather modest. So which is really quite heartening in terms of sustaining this economic growth moving forward. A second characteristic of our economic growth is that, let me see. So the first is the trajectory, sharp trajectory upward. The second characteristic is that the second is the structural transformation, and the third is that our total factor productivity, which is not just capital and labor, but there's also the technology element there. That's why its total factor productivity has been the fastest now in ASEAN at 3.3%. So all these three features of the economy, the sharp upward trajectory in recent years, and then the structural transformation plus the sharp pickup in total factor productivity suggests that our economic growth is sustainable moving forward. Okay, our external position. Next slide. Our external position is pretty strong and favorable in terms of current account and external debt, overseas Filipino remittances, and the merchandise trade and net foreign direct investment. You can see that from January to October, we were already at $7.9 billion in foreign direct investment, compared with $8 billion for the whole of 2016. So I'm pretty sure that by the end of December 2017, our foreign direct investment would have surpassed $8 billion. Okay, and then also our tourist arrivals has picked up quite sharply. Tourist arrivals now number around 7 million. It was 6 million between January and November 2017. And tourist receipts during those 11 months were already at $5 billion. Okay. Next slide. Okay. This is rising foreign investments in manufacturing. This is a very important feature of the economy, that there is a manufacturing resurgence. Our manufacturing sector used to be really lethargic, and that is why our exports were also not performing well. But in recent years, the manufacturing sector has resurged, and our exports contributing to our export performance. So foreign investors are keenly recognizing the potential of the Philippines as a manufacturing hub. About a third of actual foreign net equity investments during the first 9 months of 2017 went into manufacturing, compared with 9% a year ago. In terms of planned investments, manufacturing accounted for 55% for the first 9 months of 2017. up from 31% a year ago. Our fiscal position also remains strong, and we have, of course, you know that our investment grade has been upgraded by Fitch recently. The most recent was by Fitch, and so we expect to maintain this investment grade position, and we hope to even raise it further when we meet these credit ratings agencies. The tax effort has steadily increased in recent years, reaching close to 15% in the third quarter of 2017. This has allowed the budget to remain under control, reaching 2.4% in 2016 and at 1.9% as of September 2017. And the situation has also reduced government debt to 40% of GDP. It used to be as high as 70 to 80% in 2004, and we were about to be declared, in default of our external obligations. But this has improved significantly. The declining debt has also reduced the share of interest rates going into payment, servicing of our debt. So, all told, we have greater fiscal space, showing primary expenditures rising to 15.6% of GDP as of the third quarter 2017. Public infrastructure spending. So with greater fiscal space, the government has been able to increase investments in human and physical capital. For infrastructure, we will raise spending from 4% of GDP in 2017 to 6% by at least 6% by 2022, or an investment cash basis of 6.8 trillion pesos over 6 years, making the administration using the term golden age of infrastructure, and hopefully the golden age of the economy as a whole. Next slide. Our vibrant economy is producing more and better jobs. You can see that unemployment is pretty decent, and more importantly, underemployment has dropped sharply. Underemployment used to be our the harder nut to crack, but it has now gone down to 16% from it used to be 21%. And you can see on the right-hand side graph that the share of wage and salary employment has increased sharply, signifying the quality of jobs has improved. The number of non-agricultural jobs generated has increased significantly. Non-agricultural has increased significantly in recent years, particularly due to an increase in manufacturing and construction jobs. The drop in agricultural jobs seems to be due to the structural shift to industry jobs and the exit of child workers from agriculture or in agriculture sector, likely as a result of the CCT program and other investment in education by the public sector. These trends seem to continue beyond 2017. Okay, let me now, I was going to talk about regional development, but I think we have a time constraint, so I'll go now to the outlook of the economy. You can see that the prospects are pretty bright. So the Philippines is expected to remain one of the fastest growing economies in Asia over the next couple of years at least. in 2018, Philippine GDP growth could be the second fastest, next only to India. And our forecasts are not too different from the forecast of other financial institutions. Next slide. So this shows a generally positive outlook that is being shared by the international financial institutions and the private sector. And then we expect better performance of the global economy according to the IMF and the World Bank. So the external sector for us seems to be favorable to our exports, with a broad-based acceleration in growth pushing the sector's growth to 3.7% in 2017. Okay, our medium-term forecasts, which are the basis for our DBCC formulation of the budget, Development Budget Coordinating Committee. So given the foregoing, we are targeting an annual growth rate of 7 to 8% in 2018 and thereafter. With these growth rates, the economy will expand by 50%. Will expand 50% by 2022 from its base in 2016. Likewise, per capita income is expected to increase by 40% from US dollars 3,550 in 2015 to at least 5,000 in 2022, or even before. In fact, achieving upper middle income country status can be achieved by us, perhaps even by the end of 2018 or in 2019 at the latest. Okay, what are the expected drivers of growth? They are indicated there on the slide. So the domestic demand is expected to pick up as household consumption will likely improve following recently approved tax reform package, which will benefit 99% of taxpayers. So I don't know whether there's so many belly achers about, the difficulty of the problems with this train, and which is the first package only of the CTRP. In fact, the train will benefit 99% of Filipino taxpayers. And the non-taxpayers, of course, are exempted from paying taxes. Household consumption is also seen to benefit from expanded employment opportunities from the government's Build program. You will see a lot of flagship projects which we have processed over the past year and a half, breaking ground this year. So people have been saying that, oh, after a year and a half, nothing, we cannot see anything. That's going to be belied by this year's groundbreaking of several flagship projects. Investments will be supported by both the public and private construction, as well as large public infrastructure program crowding in private investments. On the supply side, the industry sector will continue to benefit from strong public and private construction, while manufacturing resurgence should continue with rising foreign investments in the sector. Wholesale and retail trade, as well as transport and communications, will continue to grow on account of stronger consumption, rising tourism, and the proposed liberalization of the retail trade. The demand for financial services will also rise as the economy expands. Okay, then we also need to talk a little bit about risks and uncertainties to our growth expectations that are also shown on the slide. On the external front, slower than expected growth in some advanced economies can be possible. Then inward-looking policies, an extended period of policy uncertainty, for example, post-Brexit negotiations, and normalization of Fed funds policy rates, China's financial sector risks and excessive credit growth, geopolitical tensions like the one in Qatar and North Korea, and then on the domestic front, increased intensity and frequency of natural hazards, including seasonal typhoons, droughts, and dry spells, La Nina in 2018 and El Nino in 2019. Also, restrictive employment protection legislation. There's some, movements in that direction. Possible, and then another risk is possible delay in the implementation of infrastructure projects, infrastructure and reconstruction projects, and logistics bottlenecks. I hope we will minimize delays in infrastructure, in the implementation of infrastructure projects. And then, of course, peace and security risks. And finally, the political cacophony in our country, I think, is not going to be favorable to future growth prospects. We would like to minimize that cacophony. And I hope this private sector can help us reduce that to the minimum. So how can we sustain or accelerate economic growth? We have 10 points. Improve government processes dealing with business to attract and increase both foreign direct and local investments. Ease restrictions on foreign investments. We are doing that in the 11th foreign investment negative list, especially in public utilities, retail trade, telecoms, certain professions, and public procurement, as these areas are likely to provide significant social benefits. Third, pursue the proposed comprehensive tax reform program. So going beyond package 1, we hope all of the packages will be passed within the year. Otherwise, delaying that to 2019 will be a problem, given that it's going to be an election year. And then number 4, ensure the timely execution of the budget. Well, Secretary Jokno has been making a vow that any underspending would be minimal. Okay, and number 6, this is very important, especially given the rice issue now. Lifting the quantitative restrictions on rice should be pursued in earnest, as it will reduce the retail price of rice, thereby increasing the purchasing power of households, especially the poor. Number 7, the current PDP also emphasizes the importance of improving the productivity of farmers. And in fact, if QRs or quantitative restrictions are replaced by tariffs, then the revenue from the tariffs can be used to improve the productivity of farmers. Number 8, agendum that we should do to accelerate or sustain economic growth is remain vigilant and continue the implementation of programs and projects focusing on hazards and disaster resiliency, and pursue continuous growth in agriculture, forestry, and fisheries. Number 9, ensure timely restoration to normalcy in the adversely affected areas in Mindanao to restore consumer and investor confidence. Number 10, business confidence will be boosted if Congress can focus on passing key legislative economic reforms rather than political distractions. Okay, let me conclude by saying that we remain upbeat regarding the country's economic outlook, sans these distractions. We remain committed to pursuing the reforms outlined in the Philippine Development Plan 2017 to 2022, as we believe that in doing so, we will be helping our countrymen gradually achieve their aspiration and vision for a matatag, maginhawa, at panatag na buhay para sa lahat. Thank you very much, and thank you for your attention.
Thank you very much. Secretary Pernia, please remain on the stage as there will be a question and answer portion. At this point, ladies and gentlemen, you might want to ask one or two questions regarding the presentation of our good secretary. There are microphones there in the middle, in the aisle for you to come up there and ask the questions. Some of you might also want to write them down. And because after Secretary Pernia would have left because he has another meeting today, we can forward the same questions to his office and he'll try his best to answer it.
Yeah, I'm sorry if I was in a rush because, you know, Ed Francisco was so kind and gracious in allowing me to speak first so I could catch my plane to go back to Manila for another engagement.
Okay, so ladies and gentlemen, the floor is now open for questions. Anybody would want to start? Okay, yes, please, sir. There's a microphone there. Please state name and the company where you are from before the question. Thank you very much.
Good afternoon, Mr. Secretary. Mike Makatagal from Clark. I would like to ask you, because you haven't really mentioned about the President's decentralization agenda. What is the NEDA's plans, or what has it done or will be doing along the lines of this idea? Thank you.
You're talking about federalism, right? I think.
I'm talking about decentralization.
Yeah.
By you know, moving some of the you know, businesses or government areas or government departments from Manila to other areas.
Yes. Actually, the thrust of the Philippine Development Plan is regional and rural development outside Metro Manila. So the majority of infrastructure projects will be in areas, in regions outside Metro Manila. As you know, the Metro Manila, Calabarzon, and Central Luzon account for close to 2/3 of GDP. So we want to, you know, make the contributions of the regions and the benefits going to them be shared more broadly, more widely. And the way to do that is to provide the needed infrastructure in the outlying regions so that they can join the mainstream economy. And so inequality across regions will be reduced sharply. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much, sir. Yes, ma'am. Please state your name and your company. Thank you very much.
Yeah. I'm Teresita Pascual, Vice President for Agribusiness of the Davao City Chamber of Commerce and Industry. Sir, I'm just worried on the shift to the high-value crops because we're into food. What will happen to the food industry if our area now will be constricted to what we have now because there is a shift to high-value crops? So what's the use of earning more if food would be scarce? Food is a very essential need for everybody. Thank you, sir.
Well, I think you are talking about rice. You know, rice, our domestic retail price of rice is actually higher than the imported price of rice. So we shouldn't force rice self-sufficiency. And I've been discussing this with Secretary Piñol, whose earlier objective was rice self-sufficiency. And that is why we are going to shift from quantitative restrictions to tariffication of rice. That's going to be much better. And high-value crops. You know, whatever is our comparative advantage in terms of crops, that is where we should put our money, or we should invest and, you know, help grow, rather than being stubborn about, you know, rice self-sufficiency. And if we have this tariffication of rice, then we can, it will be, the private sector will be free to, you know, engage in importation, and the price of rice will be brought down to more competitive world levels.
Sir,
So-
I'm not only talking about rice, sir. I'm into livestock. And we are just saving our industry because right now we are feeling the pain and the favoritism on market because it's more favorable to import raw mats for livestock production rather than encourage farmers to plant corn, which is a basic need for livestock. So I guess, sir, and I'm begging that a reconsideration on this area would be considered. Thank you, sir.
No, I think our corn sector is performing pretty well, and of course we need to boost our livestock industry to the extent we can, and high value crops, if we can export them and gain foreign exchange from that activity, then the export earnings can be used to import whatever the deficit would be in terms of livestock requirements, as well as other deficits in the food area. And actually, we have now the Department of Agriculture has a major project in the dairy industry. We are going to boost the dairy industry with help from Brazil and Argentina and New Zealand to get our dairy industry going. Okay. So
thank you, sir.
That's okay.
Okay. Would there be more questions? Yes, sir. You can go to the microphone, sir, and please state your name and the company where you're from before the question. Thank you, sir.
John Besano, we are in retail. Happen to be a member of Davao City Chamber. Recently, we know the stock market is an indicator of any country's economy. U.S. and China stock market is on a fall, and they are our major trading partner. How would that impact on Philippines' economy?
Oh, you're talking about the stock market. The stock market, as you know, is a very volatile market, and it can plummet overnight. And the algorithm, the stock market is now driven by algorithm, and any tinkering or any change in the algorithm can really result in automatic downfall of the stock market or rise in the stock market. So I think that has been the problem in the past week. And also it's a matter of sentiment, and any major policymaker, central banker, or political leader saying something about making a comment on the economy or exchange rates can have an impact on the stock market. So, but the stock market is not really a robust indicator of the economy.
But you mentioned algorithm, but this is that fundamental in effect? Don't you agree that stock market is indeed an indicator of any country's economy? It's as if it's a third party,
Well,
has nothing to do with reality.
To some extent, it is an indicator of the financial sector of the economy, not the real sector. You have to think about the real sector and the financial sector. These are two different, although related sectors.
Okay, I think we have time for, two questions. Okay, we will indulge. Please, and then ma'am, after her, it will be your turn. Yes, please go ahead. So those are the two last questions. Other questions, please write it down. We will give to, okay. All right. Yes, ma'am, please.
Yes, I'm Olivia Limpeal, President of Distillery Alimtuaco and also Director of the Chamber of Commerce of the Philippine Islands, and a student of Secretary Pernia in the UP School of Economics. So my question is, Secretary Pernia, what would the impact of the BBL or going to federalism have on the business sector? Because so far everything is talk about politics, right? But definitely this move will have a very big impact on business, but nobody can say what it is. And has this been included in your development plan of 2017 to 2022?
Okay, actually, the Philippine Development Plan is completely bereft of discussion on federalism, because our emphasis there is strengthening the regional economies first, strengthening the regional economies, the provincial economies, before embarking on a major undertaking like federalism. That is my own personal view. This is not policy, and we hope that it will take more time for federalism to really take root, and before that we are able to strengthen the economy with better infrastructure investment in those areas.
So what do you think the business community can do, right, so that we can ensure that we will not be adversely affected by such major change in the form of government?
You know, the private sector is the engine of economic growth. So if the private sector brings its weight to bear on the political part of the economy or the government and governance in general, then it can have, you should be able to get your opinions and views across. And I think the president is not close-minded. He can be, he does listen to voices from the private sector, if it is, especially if it is heavy and persistent enough. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much, ma'am. And lastly, yes, yes, ma'am.
Secretary, good afternoon. I am a former president of the Butuan City Chamber of Commerce, and my name is Jocelyn Ye. While listening, sir, you said we have to be very vigilant on the downside of China's financial sector risks and excessive credit growth. Sir, please expound. Thank you.
Well, that is something that the Chinese have to contend with. There's some signs of the Chinese economy overheating, and this would have ripple effects or even repercussions on economies that deal with China, including ours. So that's just really, that's a possibility, because China, I think the real estate sector in China is also rather, heated, maybe not overheated, but already heating up.
Okay, I think that, Secretary, that deserves another different type of presentation. So, ladies and gentlemen, Secretary Pernia, and we would like to call on the stage at this point the Manila Times Chairman Dante Ang and Dante Francis Ang II, our CEO, to give the plaque of appreciation to Secretary Pernia. Come up the stage and please stay in the middle.
But by the way, my presentation will be made available if you are interested in the details.
Oh yes, okay. Secretary, can you repeat that again? I don't think they heard it.
My presentation will be made available widely in the NEDA website, and so it can be downloaded, especially for those who want to look at the details, because I was rather rushed in my presentation.
Not by me, sir. Not by me. Okay, thank you very much, Secretary Pernia. Okay, thank you once again, sir, and safe travels. I know where you're going back to Manila.